Yashoda Nandana Prajajanarandana Yashoda Nandana Prajajanarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Abhadudavirari Jaya Radha Kunjavirari Jaya Gopi Janava Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Janava Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Prajajanarajana Yashoda Nandana Prajajanarajana Yamuna Tira Hari Yamuna Tira Manjari Ayarada Javirari Jayad Hamadava Javirari Jaya Gopijana Valabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopijana Valabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Vishnupada, Pranamsa Pravadakacharya, Tatatata Srimad of Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Charya Shil Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Vishnupada, Pranamsa Pravadakacharya, Tatatata Srimad Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 19, The Island of Jamvudvip. Text number 6. Navaisa atmat mavantam surittama saktas trilokayam bhagavan vasudevaya nastri kritam kashmalam ashnuvita na lakshamanam chapi vihatumarhati navaisa atmatmavatam suhritrama saktas trilokayam bhagavan vasudevaya nastri kritam kashmalam ashnuvita na lakshamanam chapi vihatum arhati navaisa atmatmavatam suritama saktas trilokayam bhagavan vasudevaya nastri kritam kashmalam ashnuvita na lakshamanam chapi vihatum arhati. Na, not. Vai, indeed. Sa, he. Atma, the Supreme Soul. Atmavatam, of the self-realized souls. Surit Tama, the best friend. Saktaha, attached. Trilokyam, to anything within the three worlds. Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vasudevaya, the all-pervading Lord. Na, not. Sri Kritam, obtained because of his wife. Kashmalam, sufferings of separation. Ashnuvita, would obtain. Na, not. Lakshamanam, his younger brother Lakshmana. Cha, also. Api, certainly. Vihatum, to give up. Arhati, be able. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Since Lord Ramachandra is the Supreme Personality of Godhead of Vasudeva, he is not attached to anything in this material world. He is the most beloved supersoul of all self-realized souls, and he is their intimate friend. He is full of all opulences. Therefore, he could not possibly have suffered because of separation from his wife, nor could he have given up his wife and Lakshman, his younger brother. To give up either would have been absolutely impossible. Purport. In defining the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we say that he is full in all six opulences: wealth, fame, strength, influence, beauty, and renunciation. He is called renounced because he is not attached to anything in this material world. He is specifically attached to the spiritual world and the living entities there. The affairs of the material world take place under the superintendence of Durga Devi. Shrishti Stiti Pralaya Sadhana Shaktir Eka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga. Everything is going on under the strict rules and regulations of the material energy, represented by Durga. Therefore, the Lord is completely detached and need not give attention to the material world. Sita Devi belongs to the spiritual world. Similarly, Lord Lakshmana, Ramachandra's younger brother, is a manifestation of Shankarshan, and Lord Ramachandra himself is Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since the Lord is always spiritually qualified, he is attached to servants who always render transcendental loving service unto him. He is attached to the truth and life, not to Brahminical qualities. Indeed, he is never attached to any material qualities. Although he is the supersoul of all living entities, he is specifically manifest to those who are self-realized, and he is especially dear to the heart of his transcendental devotees. Because Lord Ramachandra descended to teach human society how dutiful a king should be, he apparently gave up the company of Mother Sita and Lakshman. Factually, however, he could not have given them up. One should therefore learn about the activities of Lord Ramachandra from a self-realized soul. Then one can understand the transcendental activities of the Lord. Om Gena Charamandasya Gyanjana Shalakaya Chakshama Tamyana Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we are continuing to hear about the transcendental qualities, activities, form of Lord Ramachandra. And in the previous verse, text 5, it mentioned that Lord Ramachandra, one of his missions, it was not only to kill Ravana, but also to teach mortal beings basically about the suffering that comes due to attachment in this material world. It specifically talks about material happiness centered around sex life and one's wife. But they clarify in this verse that it is actually not possible that Lord Ramachandra could have suffered because of this separation. And Prabhupada explains in the purport the difference, or mentions in the purport, the difference between the what is sometimes called, what he and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur sometimes referred to as the 3/4 energy versus the 1/4 energy of the Supreme Lord. Of course, what is being referred to is the spiritual world and the material world. The spiritual world is said to be 3/4 of the total manifestation of reality, while the material world is is 1/4. And as is explained in the purport, the material world is under the superintendence of Durga Devi, sometimes known as Devi Dam. And everything is under the strict rules of Durga Devi, who is the representative of the material energy. And in this material energy, there is always happiness and distress. Whatever situation we're in, there is never a there's never a situation that is purely one thing or the other. It's a world of duality, happiness and distress, hot, cold, attachment, aversion, etc. It's similar to the idea in Chinese philosophy and Taoism of yin and yang, that there's always the little dots, one thing and the other. And in the material world, that is exactly the situation. If we ever try to enjoy both in the act of trying to obtain the enjoyment and afterwards, there is usually a lot of suffering, because we have to work so hard to obtain the resources necessary to attempt to satisfy our senses. It is not the fact that everything is just laid out for us, especially in Kali Yuga. Despite the propaganda of this modern civilization, that everything is so easy, we are so much more advanced, that we are so much better off than those who have lived previously. Despite all of that propaganda, we find that actually suffering has increased, both in the personal fabric of one's life. There's so much higher and growing incidence of things like depression, anxiety, loneliness, various other mental health conditions, even in one's own material position. People are finding it very difficult. They're laden with debts, unable to find permanent housing. And there's so many economic crises that are ongoing, that if I was just to sit here and talk about all of them, it would probably be the entire class time. And then also the social fabric is unraveling. That the same expectations, mores, life events, the same structure that in one way or another, people have been able to give to their life through these social institutions are also unraveling due to this the underpinnings, the assumptions of this modern civilization. So despite the claim of material opulence, and if we're being fair, there's much material opulence in this modern society. But it comes with so much distress that one has to deal with in order to obtain these various luxuries that modern society affords us. And then also when things are taken away, we might obtain whatever materially enjoyable situation is there, but when it is taken away, we lament. That is also a way that suffering comes in. We might very much enjoy something at the moment, but there's always the knowledge somehow or another for anybody who is even a tiny bit intelligent that this enjoyment will come to an end, that this is not a permanent position, that instead it is here today, gone tomorrow. And even that realization, that knowledge, mars the enjoyment that we get from material things, from anything that we know will be taken away from us, be at an end. And ultimately, everything will be taken away from us at the end of our life. On a material perspective, all that we are left with is more or less our good and bad karmas that are stored in our subtle body and are carried with us into our future lives. Everything else are accolades, material relationships, our wealth, our position in society is all finished at the end of this body. So how can one think that we can enjoy this body? But it is very few people that just by hearing that would be ready to totally give up the ways and means of maintaining the body in various ways, of becoming totally renounced, which Prabhupada defines in this purport as not being attached to anything in this material world. So there's also a system, of course, by which we can have regulated interaction with the material energy. Not that there will be no suffering, but that by that suffering, we come to realize this material world is not a place to stay, and that we want to transfer ourselves, or that we endeavor to transfer ourselves from the 1/4 energy to the 3/4 energy, which is the spiritual energy of the Lord. And in that energy, there's actual enjoyment without any suffering. So because the Supreme Lord is always the enjoyer. It says here that Lord Ramachandra could not possibly have suffered because of separation from his wife. Because the Supreme Lord never suffers. Even things that are from an external vision, miseries, from an external vision, causes of suffering, are to the Supreme Lord enjoyable, because they are part of his pastime. You need the entire, you need all of the different tastes, all of the different ups and downs to have a good story. There's a friend of the family growing up that was very involved in the Memphis theater scene. One time she told me that, all good stories, all good plays or even books or anything involve conflict. There's always a central conflict that is resolved throughout the book. So there has to be some, for there to be a good story, there has to be some, what externally seems like suffering or dissension or unfavorable situation. However, in the Supreme Lord's internal energy, in the spiritual energy, it is always enjoyable. And this is the Supreme Lord's situation, that is his constitutional position, is that he is just enjoying. As Prabhupada says in the purport here, he is completely detached and doesn't give any attention to the material world. It is, only the expansion of the expansion of the expansion of the expansion that really has, before you really start getting into incarnations, expansions that really interact with the material world on a, one could say, more intimate level. Of course, these various forms from time to time come to the material world as incarnations, but you really have to get down to the 3 forms of Vishnu before there's any regular, you could say, contact with the material world. And even, if you're at the Mahavishnu level, the contact is just a glance by which he starts the agitation of the modes of nature, of the material energy, through the time factor, which manifests the various objects, situations, activities that we see in the material world. But Krishna himself and many of his various expansions, their only task, their only situation is to enjoy. Everything else is, all of the management of the material world is done by expansions. And, we could say the lower level management is done by jivas, not even the Supreme Lord himself, in the form of the various demigods. So the Lord just enjoys. Krishna in Vrindavan doesn't really give any thought to the maintenance of the material world. He just manifests and enjoys in his various pastimes. But as I said, sometimes these various incarnations do come down to the material world for various reasons. Of course, to attract us to say, how nice are these pastimes that the Supreme Lord gave or is performing eternally. And he does this in his various expansions because people are attracted to different things. As Prabhupada opens up the purport, he is full in all opulences: wealth, fame, strength, influence, beauty, and renunciation. But he manifests these things differently because people are attracted to different things. That's personalism. It's not that everybody is attracted to the same form of God. So some people might be attracted to Lord Krishna's form. Some people might be attracted to Lord Ramachandra's form. And some people might be attracted to other forms. This is very different than many religious traditions, actually, where you just have kind of one revelation and then, or one form, so to speak. And then, you either have to accept or reject. So if you take Christianity, for example, then the only really form that you have available is the form of God the Son, Jesus. Of course, there's the other members of the Trinity, but you don't get so many pastimes, really, about those two, or so much detailed information. And if you're not attracted to that form, then you're kind of just out of luck, because it's one and done, more or less. While the Bhagavatam viewpoint is that the Supreme Lord is always coming to attract his devotees, or to attract the devotees and the various living entities who could become devotees. And also, and he does that by manifesting various pastimes in different moods. So if you take, for example, Lord Ramachandra and Lord Krishna, if you look historically at when the British first came to India and started looking at Indian culture, and specifically the Vaishnava culture, they didn't really like Lord Krishna so much, but they much more appreciated Lord Ramachandra, just because, the culture at that time, the British culture at that time, it was very, proper high society sort of thing, where there's all of these etiquette and rules and social situations and things like that. So they saw Krishna and it's like, you know, this, this god goes and sleeps with other people's wives. He doesn't really have a position in the social structure. He kind of leaves all rules and regulations behind. Uh, that and they didn't really appreciate so much, but they could very much appreciate Lord Ramachandra, because he showed, as Prabhupada says in the purport, how a dutiful king is supposed to behave, which very much matched with their own conceptions of how a person should act, and what is proper behavior. Of course, some don't know how many of them became devotees, if any, but there was some appreciation there. As opposed, if you look at much of the culture nowadays, especially in the West, although it's starting to creep into India, people appreciate Krishna much more. They view him as much more free-flowing, knows how to enjoy himself, things like that. While there are many people who criticize Lord Ramachandra for being too strict. I've heard multiple people, including even some Indians, criticize Lord Ramachandra, saying, how could he give up Sita, after he heard the critique of, just some insignificant washerman, that he sent Sita and their children away. And, they criticize, they say, he's too strict. How could he do that? So different forms attract different people. And of course, in the case of Lord Ramachandra, there's, of course, explanations for why he does the things that he does, including sending away Sita. But to understand that, one has to learn from a self-realized soul. That is, one has to learn in parampara. One can't just read the books and then make up whatever you want, or make up one's own interpretation. One has to, in order to actually understand the position of the Supreme Lord, hear from a bona fide person. And this is actually true in all realms of knowledge. It's not just, it's most obvious in spiritual knowledge, but in many fields of knowledge, it is useful, if not necessary, to have some form of teacher, so that one doesn't, get lost in the weeds, so to speak, that one can actually properly contextualize things. I know in my own area of physics, you get a lot of people that just have some very crazy ideas, because they were, they just learned physics haphazardly from the internet, and then think they can disprove Einstein by, a 3-line argument or something. Um, and in spiritual life, you can have a similar situation where people try to understand things without reference to a parampara, to a Siddhantic tradition. And then they come into all sorts of weird conclusions. That is not actually the understanding of what Lord Ramachandra or any other incarnation is actually about. Because the system given by Lord Ramachandra is through parampara. And specifically in this time in Kali Yuga, especially at this time in Kali Yuga, it is given by Lord Chaitanya's representative, Srila Prabhupada, who's given so many books that explain actually the position of the Supreme Lord and teach us how to obtain the highest good, the highest position in not just the world, not just the material world, but in all of reality, that actually can give us the way to restore us to our constitutional position, free from this 1/4 energy that is the material world. So we have about 13 minutes left. I guess I'll stop here and ask for questions or comments. Anybody? Thank you for your appreciations. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
I will, Prabhu.
I want to thank you for another nice class.
Thank you.
I'm trying to digest all of what I have heard. It is it's interesting how people's perception even of the Supreme Personality of Godhead changes over time as well, not even cultural conditions necessarily, I guess, but the frame of mind, the consciousness of people. It's interesting to me. You pointed out the fact that the British had some appreciation for Lord Ramachandra, but viewed Krishna as immoral and therefore unattractive. While in the contemporary context, we find that people have an opposite view, that they see Lord Ramachandra as excessively strict, and it's just a different frame of mind. People, and I would say people have just become much more degraded. They actually appreciate something that appears to be degraded. Krishna, of course, is never degraded, but he appears to be engaged in activities that are immoral.
Hmm.
Yeah, the British, uh, back in my college days, I remember I did a paper. What was that? Um, the course in philosophy, and I was assigned to do some paper on. I can't even remember what the topic was, but so I'm in the library, and this predates um, the wide scale availability of any information of substance on the internet. The internet had just come into being. You had bulletin boards,
Hmm.
and that was about it. There wasn't really much happening on the internet at all. So libraries were still the place to do your research, and I came upon a bunch of books that were authored by various British personalities who um, had taken it upon themselves to introduce the world to all of what was happening in India. And these were individuals that, as far as I understand, were actually paid by the British government to try to make Indians look bad.
Yeah.
So I can't recall the name of these various authors. One of them was quite famous, but he portrayed Indians as absolutely barbaric and their religious practices as barbaric, and he embellished his narrations with a lot of fabrications to reinforce the idea that these people were absolute animals engaged in just abominable activity. Um, you see something like that in the movie Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Takes place in India, right? So you have what appears to be Shivites, and they're murdering people and engage in all kinds of abominable activity, as though this is something that actually happens in India. And there are some pretty crazy things that go on in India, to be fair, but there's a lot of imagination and fantasy. And I think it all began with these British authors who um, wanted to, I guess, justify their own efforts to civilize and convert the Indians. Really, their objective was to exploit the Indians, but in the process, they wanted to convert them to Christians, and um, I guess it was okay to. I guess the idea they were trying to convey is that it's okay to exploit these people because they're basically animals, and in the course of exploiting them, we're actually benefiting them, we're uplifting them and civilizing them. So we're actually doing them a favor in the course of exploiting them. And they absolutely raped the subcontinent of India for all of its resources. They stole the jewels from various temples. Um, a lot of terrible things went on. Srila Prabhupada was telling us about how they used to cut off the fingers of the weavers, um, particularly during Gandhi's movement. Um, he had encouraged people to produce their own cloth. And so this was a challenge to the British who wanted to sell milled fabrics from England to the Indians. They had the Indians producing the cotton. They shipped that to England. where they milled it into finely milled fabric, and then they sold the fabric back to the Indians. So the Indians objected to this system of exploitation, and they began to to produce their own cloth, and so soldiers would actually round up the weavers and cut their thumbs off so that they could no longer weave. Talk about barbarism.
Yeah.
The English, of course, were the real barbarians. Anyway, uh, um, revived my memory of some of these things. I was reading this one book in the course of researching for this paper, and the stories were outrageous, and they were just specifically designed to be infuriating and incendiary, but really just complete fabrications. India, of course, was very highly cultured and very civilized, actually far more civilized than the British at the peak of their so-called advancement. Lord Ramachandra, extraordinary these avatars. You mentioned that various avatars appear for various reasons. They are described by Krishna himself in Bhagavad Gita. In the fourth chapter, text 8, he says, Parichanaya sarunam vinashaya chaduskritam dharma samstat panayarta sambhavan yuge yuge, sambhavami yuge yuge, that to deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to reestablish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium. And Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport that the real reason for Krishna's descent is especially to please his devotees, because for other purposes he has innumerable agents that can take care of that business for him. But the devotees are only satisfied in their relationship with Krishna, and to satisfy them, Krishna personally appears. So those are a few of my thoughts. I don't have a lot more to contribute, and I'll just pipe down. You got a digital hand up there from
Yeah, I see.
so Hare Krishna. Thanks again.
Hare Krishna, Kalasur Prabhu, in your last 2 minutes. Thank you so much. I wrote something in the chat, and however, I did want to ask this question about the 1/4 energy and the 3/4 energy of the spiritual world and the material world. And somehow I don't know why this thought came to me. I'm sure, like I'm sure in my heart I probably do understand this. However, I do appreciate you so much, and some of the ways that you explain things is very simple for me, like very simplified. I appreciate that. So when we say the pure devotees, they come into this material world, and we hear like they're in. Well, let me just retract this a little bit. When I heard you share this, for some reason it brought up like physicality, the physical material world and the physical spiritual world, right? As opposed to consciousness. Right. So then my very small, tiny brain intelligence went to, okay, these pure devotees, they're coming into this material world, the bona fide pure devotees. However, they're in spiritual consciousness. How do I understand this in terms of like physicality and the difference of consciousness? I don't know if that's clear.
So my thoughts on it, I guess, is that, of course, So the spiritual energy can come into, can I guess, inject itself within the 1/4 realm. Of course, the opposite can happen. There's no material energy in the spiritual world. But because I mean, ultimately, all of us, we're spirit souls, right? Which is spiritual energy. I mean, it's the Tatishta Shakti, it's the marginal potency. But there is able to be a injection by the Lord's potency of spiritual reality into the material world, even if it looks physically like the same thing. It reminds me in the 11th canto of the discussions with the Hamsa avatar, where this chain of questions, basically. I think it's the 4 Kumaras who are asking about the Vedas and how, if the words that we're seeing are made of material energy, right? They're just written in a book or spoken by somebody. How can they give us liberation from the material energy, from the very material energy that they're made from? And the short version of the answer is, of course, that the Lord, by his potency, spiritualizes them. So, physicality can, and it seems from that discussion, or the discussion in Shastra, that physicality can be either material or spiritual. Just like with the deities, they look like material forms, but the metal or wood or marble or whatever they're made out of becomes spiritualized, even though you can actually physically touch them. In the same way with the pure devotees, particularly the Nityasiddha pure devotees, who come from the spiritual world, and even though they take on a body made of the material elements, because their activities and their consciousness is always thinking of Krishna, then it becomes spiritualized. I don't know if all of that semi-rambling answered the question or not.
Yeah, it definitely satisfies what I was trying to get a little clarity about. And something else that came through as you were speaking, I'm really into like prayers in the Bhagavatam. And what you did is just open up another awareness about the questions in the Bhagavatam. And, I think of Maharaj Parikshit, and so much of it is, so much of what we hear is based on his questions. Now it just kind of encouraged me to kind of look at questions, right? Because you talk about the question for Kumaras. I'm like, oh, okay, questions. So thank you very much, Prabhu.
Yeah, thank you. I remember one time my Guru Maharaj said in a lecture that not only the answers in Bhagavatam are, things that you would never think of as answers. They're just like so far beyond. But even the questions in Bhagavatam are things that most people would never even think of asking. So yeah, they're both perfect questions and perfect answers.
Thank you. Thank you, Guru.
Are there any more questions or comments? I'm not sure how much time we have left necessarily. There's maybe time for one more quick comment or question. Or if not, we'll end here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Brahma